I'm live. It says so. Well, it did say so. Doesn't say so anymore. The 1 minute bell. I think it was a minute late, Nate. Was I a minute late? Did I mess up? I hope not. Let's see who's here. There's Nate, there's John, there's Andrew, there's Eugene. Webb Bixby's in the house. Donna's here. Bill. Hello, Bill. Haha. I did have a great mom story from in a few minutes today. Do I? Donna says, "Do you think Ken has a job interview after this?" No, I got to meet with my parole officer. Neither of those things are true. I don't know why. I think it's because I wore a T-shirt yesterday. I wore a T-shirt yesterday, and then hey, Leah's here, by the way. There's somebody I missed, and also Matthew. I wore a T-shirt yesterday, and I felt really underdressed afterwards. So I immediately put on this shirt and tie, slept in them, woke up with them, and it was time for a show. Speaking of which, why don't we do a show? I have some ideas. I don't know, Bill. You know what I'm not saying. Anyway, let's do a thing, and then we'll talk after as well, right? Playing Hall Monitor and the App Store before the App Store. It is Friday, the 11th of December, 2020, and this is macOS Can Live. Coming to you live and direct from Network 23. Not really, though. Hi, I'm Ken Ray, welcoming you into this live edition of macOS Ken, cleverly called macOS Ken Live. It's a thing we do Monday through Friday, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern, other times, other places, and I am very glad to have you along. This is the last thing I do. It's not really true. I was going to say this is the last thing I do for the week, but then I've got, in a few minutes to record and edit and post. So this is the last thing we do for the week. And I'm very glad to have you here. The second half of the show, we are going to be talking about an interesting lawsuit filed by Cydia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right or not, but Cydia was the App Store before there was an App Store. They are now bringing suit against Apple, which is kind of interesting. We'll talk about that in the second half of the show. First half of the show, though, I found myself thinking about our friend Rod Hall. Do you know who Rod Hall is? We'll talk about three analysts today, three of which that I talked about earlier this week. Actually, four, because we're going to talk about June Zhang as well. People have asked me before why I spend so much time talking about the financial analysts. And I can give you a few different answers. I talk a lot about the financial analysts because a lot of times I think they have interesting ideas. I think they have interesting ways to look at Apple. I don't own shares. I don't advise people on whether they should own shares. None of that is my bag. And yet I watch them. I think it was my 13th birthday. I know this is weird, but stick with me. My 13th birthday, my parents were divorced when I was young, but they both lived in the same city off and on for a while. And my 13th birthday, I believe it was, my dad picked me up to take me to my birthday party. I don't remember if he hung around the birthday party or not. It was at a Showbiz Pizza, which was my favorite place in the world. And so he picked me up, and it should have taken us 20 minutes to get there. And it took us between 45 minutes and an hour to get there. And when we got to the place, my mom was actually actively, frantically worried because she knew how long it should take to get there. And it took easily twice as long. And the reason is because my dad grew up in a suburb of Nashville. And that suburb of Nashville was the only way he knew how to get anywhere in Nashville. So if you look at the left hand of your bottom corner of your screen, and you look at the right hand bottom corner of your screen, the quickest way to get there is just to go straight across, right? Except my dad only knew how to get there by going to the top middle of the screen. And that's why I talk about Apple and the financial analysts. Because when I started this show, I was actually producing a financial talk show for Rob Black. I was actually producing his radio show and his television show. And so I was constantly looking at the financial stuff. And so then when I started doing Apple News, Well, that was an easy place to start off. Plus, I think sometimes they have interesting ideas, which brings us back to our friend Mr. Hall. Goldman Sachs analyst Rod Hall decided to stick with his $75 price target on Apple shares this week. They're currently trading around 120. He also does your thing. He understands that the iPhone 12 Pro and iPhone 12 Pro Max are hard to get right now, but he doesn't think that has anything to do with demand. He thinks that has to do with difficulty in production with COVID-19. Now, what if it actually does have to do with demand? Well, he says demand is actually slowing down. We're starting to see less of a wait time for the iPhone 12 Pro and iPhone 12 Pro Max. So even if demand was stellar and that was the reason you couldn't get them, well, now demand is not quite as long. And so obviously that shiny thing is not as shiny as everybody thought it was. Also, he says the iPhone 11 is doing better in Europe than the iPhone 12 is, which means more people are buying the iPhone 11, which means the average selling price of the iPhone is going to go down. Now, this is a problem that Apple has actually kind of addressed before. I think it was when they had the iPad and then they introduced the cheaper, by which I mean less expensive iPad mini. And people said, well, isn't that going to eat into your profit margin? Isn't that going to eat into your average selling price? Isn't that going to eat into your bottom line? And Apple's like, yeah, okay, so we're going to take money from ourselves and give it to ourselves. They weren't concerned about that. And that's before services were that big a deal. Listen, if people are buying iPhone 11s, they're still buying apps in the App Store. They're still signing up for Apple Music. They're still signing up for Apple TV Plus and Apple Arcade, and you name it. The average selling price of the iPhone goes down a little bit. I don't think Apple's going to be worried about that because what it means is somebody bought into the Apple ecosystem. And once they're in, right? Finally, said Mr. Hall, while sales this holiday season seem to be better than sales in 2019, he and his think it's possible that the thing is that shopping started earlier this year. And so shopping's going to end earlier this year. So the incredible sales that Apple is seeing right now, they're going to dry up before the holidays. And it's just going to be a regular holiday season, which it's worth remembering tend to be blowout for Apple. Apple does not do poorly in the holidays. So to say that it's just going to be like another holiday season for Apple is still saying more than Kmart. So it sounds like I'm making fun of the guy. And the thing is, I'm not. Everything he's talking about in there is actually true. It's actually, I mean, not true. I'm not saying he's right. I'm saying it's stuff that I think we should probably all think about. The whole thing, I mean, I know I started talking about it when the iPhone 12 came out and when the iPhone 12 Pro Max came out. I'm really curious about it, honestly, with the AirPods Max. They sold out. They sold out. They're like 3.5 months wait for the AirPods Max. Do that many people really want $550 headphones? Or could Apple not get it together to make enough of them? Or is it a combination of the two? And what's interesting to me is Mr. Hall has decided that it is the demand for the iPhone 12 is waning, the iPhone 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max is waning, as opposed to saying it's possible that this is a thing that we should look at. But of course, his job is to have an opinion, right? And it's almost like he has to double down. I likened him to Jun Zhang earlier this week, and I think or earlier in this conversation. Jun Zhang was wrong about Apple for 4 years straight, according to a piece that I read in Apple Insider, before he finally left Rosenblatt in the early part of 2019, I think it was. So almost 2 years ago now. That's how bad this guy was. I still remember, and it was 2 years ago. And I shouldn't say he was bad, although he struck me as bad. And yet maybe it shouldn't, because everybody's got a brand, right? Everybody's got an idea of how they think. You tune in for a certain thing, and that's true for a television show, that's true for a podcast, that's true for the radio, and it's true for the financial analyst as well. There's a guy I used to make fun of, and I shouldn't say make fun of, but there was a guy that I used to make light of, I would say. Bill Power was his name. He's an analyst, and I called him William the Weather Vane Power because he was constantly moving his target, constantly moving his price target by a couple of bucks. And he would introduce different reasons each time. And I, jokingly called him the weather vane because it was constantly moving. But that's not even fair of me because it's sort of like, well, like I was saying earlier about the quickest way to get from one point to another. Um, I was thinking about pilots earlier today when I was thinking about Mr. Power. You don't fly straight from Chicago to San Francisco. You may fly nonstop from Chicago to San Francisco, but from the time you take off to the time you land, there are constant course corrections. I mean, maybe there are things like, there's weather ahead and you got to go around, or maybe you took off going that way, but then had to spin around so that you could actually fly west instead of east. I don't know anything about being a pilot except I've heard from more than one person. It's constant course correction. You don't set it and forget it. I mean, I know there's autopilot and stuff, but you spend most of the time looking at it, make sure you're going in the right direction. I shouldn't have made fun of William the Weather Vane Power. At the same time, it seems obvious that Mr. Hall is sticking to his brand. You go middle of the road, you find Morgan Stanley analyst Katie Huberty. She tends to be fairly excited about Apple stuff, but she also kind of, I have heard people say that she is cautious in her 12-month targets. Now, again, Apple's trading in the 120 range at this point. Her target right now is 136. For her part, she thinks that Apple is entering into a holiday period with its strongest portfolio of products and services in years, 80% of which have been refreshed in the last 12 months. And quarter to date, we've seen a number of positive data points that we believe can lead to a record December quarter that is underappreciated by consensus. Well, yeah, you got Rod Hall in there messing the whole thing up with a $75 target, right? It's not fair to say it's underappreciated. Well, it is fair, I guess, to say it's underappreciated by consensus because consensus is however many people are tracked, taking all of their ideas, lumping them together, averaging it out. And then the people at the high end are going to say, you people at the low end are nuts. And the people at the low end are going to say, you people at the high end are high. Huberty called out a couple of products specifically. She likes the wait times for iPhone 12. She does not see them shortening that much. And she's also turned on by the good reviews for the M1 Max and the long wait time for the M1 Max that a lot of people are seeing. She thinks the waits for the machines are actually going to lead to double-digit Mac growth in the March quarter, which is kind of interesting. March quarter is going to get well, no, the March quarter is going to be fine because the March quarter was January through March. We were hearing about COVID-19 on the news, but we weren't all buying like crazy, except for toilet paper. Couldn't find that. Sometimes you couldn't find beef. The shelves were kind of bare, but people weren't thinking, well, I'm going to be working from home forever, so I should go ahead and buy a Mac. It would be hard, even without the N1 Mac, for the March quarter of 2021 to not beat the March quarter of 2020 because the March quarter of 2020 was just another day. It was post-holidays. It was pre-lockdown. It was, how do computers normally do? Okay, well, they're probably a little bit better this year because Apple keeps growing the Mac market share, but the June quarter and the September quarter are going to be interesting to watch as far as the Mac, I think, because people have been buying them hand over fist since, your boss said, I'm still going to need you to work, but I'm going to need you to not come in. You might want to get a computer. And then all the way at the other end is Wedbush analyst Daniel Ives. He's always turned on by the iPhone. He keeps saying the same stuff that he's been saying before. The iPhone 12 represents the best iPhone launch since the iPhone 6 launch in 2014. He thinks about a third of the close to a billion iPhones out there. Close to a billion iPhones out there. He thinks about a third of the close to a billion iPhones out there are ready for an upgrade. And he upped his price target this week from $150 to $160, which puts him at a street high. Interestingly, Apple 3.0's Philip Elmer DeWitt basically said that Daniel Ives can never wait to get ahead of everybody else. So there are your two ends, I guess. You got Rod Hall, whose brand is the wheels are coming off this wagon, and Daniel Ives, whose brand is this ship's going to the stars. And they're all interesting to listen to. That's the thing. They all present interesting ideas. I have made light of the predictions of Tony Sacconaghi, Bernstein research analyst Tony Sacconaghi. Eventually, he ends up being right. Not every time. He's neutral on Apple right now, which I think is crazy. Then again, I mean, he is looking out 12 months. He's looking out 12 months, and at least he's being honest and saying, I can't see it getting much better than it is, so I'm staying neutral and I'm staying here. He's not a cheerleader. He's not a detractor. He's a cautious individual. And he also has the tenacity of a terrier. He gets an idea and he holds on to that idea, and you're not going to get it from his grip. Anyway, so all that stuff kind of interesting to me. It's just stuff that I was thinking about today when I was thinking, hey, what should we talk about today? Speaking of which, we're at about the halfway point here, and I have a favor to ask you. This is the part of the show where I either tell you about another show or ask you please to do something for me. The holidays are coming up quick. 2 weeks from today is Christmas. Now, next week is going to be regular shows. The week after that, it'll probably be 2 or 3 shows. The week after that, probably 2 or 3 shows. And then we'll be back into, going full bore at the end of the year, or at the beginning of next year, 2021, which starts in 3 weeks. If you have any questions, if you have any topics you would like to hear me hit, if you have something sort of not necessarily news of the day, but sort of bigger consideration stuff that you would like to bring to this show, please do, because I know that the day before Thanksgiving, I was useless as far as content here. I'm willing to bet that's going to happen a couple of times heading into Christmas and heading into New Year as well. Plus, right now, this show is just me saying, oh, well, that's interesting. I think I'll talk about that. I would like to hear what you would like to hear. So you can leave a comment on this video. That is probably not the best way to do it. Really, the best thing to do is send me an email, info@macosken.com, info, info@macosken.com. Tell me what you want me to talk about, please. Send in your questions, send in your comments. Because unless there's some kind of December surprise, one more thing, maybe, towards the end of the year, it's going to be me telling jokes. And I don't know any clean ones. Right. So the other story that's kind of interesting to me, and this is going to get a little bit windy. You like that hand motion? If you're only listening to the audio podcast, you're missing that's an amazing hand motion I just did there. You're welcome, planet. Story I came across in, where is it? I believe it's Ars Technica. Ars Technica says that Cydia is suing Apple for antitrust violation. You remember Cydia, don't you? When the iPhone came out in 2007, there were no apps for the iPhone except for the apps that were built in. And Steve Jobs said, hey, here's an idea, make web apps. And developers said, hey, here's an idea. Things that I can't really say out loud. So along came Cydia. Cydia basically figured out how to jailbreak an iPhone, put apps on it, and, seeing a business opportunity, they started selling those apps. And whether that was the reason that Apple got into apps or whether Apple was just biding its time, I think Apple has actually said, or some executives at Apple have actually said, that what led to the App Store was the jailbreak community. I know that Rob Walsh at Today in iOS is a firm believer that if not for the jailbreak community, we would still be talking about web apps at this point. And who knows what kind of world that would have been. Anyway, the company behind Cydia is suing Apple, arguing that Apple has monopolized the market for iOS app stores, violating antitrust law in the process. So, yeah, in a Thursday lawsuit filed in California federal court, the company behind Cydia argued that this was a flagrant violation of antitrust law, Apple trying to shut down other app stores, basically, or keep other app stores out. Apple has wrongfully acquired and maintained monopoly power in the market for iOS app distribution and in the market for iOS app payment processing, the lawsuit argues. The suit points to a number of ways this has harmed consumers. Most obviously, Apple charges a 30% commission, although that's going down to 15%. Cydia argues, well, going down to 15% for developers who make less than $1 million a year. Cydia argues that Apple couldn't get away with such high fees in a competitive market. Cydia also argues that Apple takes a long time to approve apps and limits direct communication between developers and their users. Again, Cydia argues that more competition would force Apple to up its game. Apple says there's no such thing as an app store that is separate from the iPhone. They don't feel like they're running a store that's independent. They think the whole thing is a soup to nuts thing. Now, they haven't said that here. That's actually Ars Technica's sort of summation of what Apple said in the Apple versus Epic Games fight that started back in August. Apple hasn't responded publicly to this suit yet. Sorry for people just listening to the audio podcast. I'm making faces now because I don't know exactly how I feel about this. I think Cydia is kind of right. At the same time, I want somebody to watch my back. And Apple has a vested interest in watching my back as far as apps and app stores are concerned, because if I lose trust in Apple, suddenly I'm not as willing to pay them for the services. Suddenly I'm looking around at other phones the next time it's time to upgrade. Apple has spent a very long time, engendering is the word I want to use. I'm not sure that's right. Fostering that trust that I have with them. And sometimes they mess up, but when they mess up, it's mea culpas all over the place and promises that they'll do better and, things like that. There's a story that came out, and I believe this was it was all over the place, but this one is Apple Insider. Apple and Google have decided to ban location tracking from a firm called Xmode. They'll take steps to ban location data broker Xmode from their platforms after revelations of the company's ties to military contractors, says this piece. Xmode obtains location data from apps on the App Store and Google Play Store and sells that information to contractors associated with the U.S. military and national security industry. According to the Wall Street Journal, both Apple and Google told developers that they must remove Xmode software development kits or SDKs and location trackers from their apps. Google has given developers 7 days, according to this piece. Apple has given them 14 days to be done with this. There is indication that they might be targeting certain groups in these apps or with their tracking. Is Cydia going to do that? Google has an interest in making sure that I'm not upset with Google. Apple has an interest in making sure that I'm not upset with Apple. We tie our app buying process so closely to Apple that if we find out something like this is happening in the App Store without us knowing, we're going to get mad at Apple. We might get mad at the developers as well, but we're going to get mad at Apple because Apple has been standing there saying, we've got your back. Cydia, on the other hand, is standing there saying, we have less expensive apps. And I'm not knocking Cydia. I mean, again, we might not have an app store if we didn't have them. I don't know the people behind Cydia. I am not ascribing any nefarious intent to anything that they're doing. Do they have a reason to watch my back? There is another story, and this kind of ties in my head. And I'm not sure it ties in real life, but my head's fantasy land anyway, so let's go for a second. There's another story that school systems across the country are buying Celebrite devices. Celebrite. They're the ones who make sort of the black box that you can plug your phone into and access all kinds of information. And Celebrite says that they only sell to the military and law enforcement, they say. So where are these schools getting these things? Do schools now count as law enforcement? I'm kind of curious. Because here's the problem. I think I mentioned this recently. I have a friend who had to buy a baby gate for her office. And she had to buy a baby gate for her office. She's an assistant principal in the California school system. She had to buy a baby gate for her office, not because the kids were coming in, but because the adults were coming in, because the people that she works with weren't social distancing. Celebrite encourages law enforcement not to sell its devices to the public. But if you go on eBay right now, you can find Celebrite devices. I'm not suggesting you do. I tried it once, though, because I had heard that, and I thought, well, that can't be true. And it turns out it's very true. Is the military selling these on eBay? Our police force is selling these on eBay, and I'm sorry, I remember enough about high school to know that I don't necessarily trust everybody who would have access to these devices. I don't necessarily trust that the reason that they would be looking at a kid's stuff is just because they want to look at the kid's stuff. Also, I don't necessarily trust that the angry science teacher that I had in the ninth grade wouldn't bring his wife's iPhone in and run it through the Celebrate machine to see who she was talking to. And there's no guarantee that some kid who's working in the office wouldn't have access to this thing as well. And there's no guarantee that it's not going to be sold off at some point because the school needs money to buy something. How does that tie in? I'm pretty sure that there was a way. I don't necessarily like the idea that there's only one place that I can trust. I don't like the idea of saying, well, no, 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 Apple said, and so everybody else can go hang. The problem is, though, Apple has spent so much time building up that level of trust. Cydia has not necessarily. Celebrate has this thing on their site that says, hey, hey, we only give this to the good guys. But first of all, we don't always know who the good guys are. And second, we don't know who the good guys give it to. So I don't know how I feel about it. Honestly, I think, well, no, I do know. I do know one thing about it. If Cydia is allowed to open, if Cydia is allowed to continue, and of course they are opening and they are continuing, but I mean, if legally Apple has to remove any impediment so that Cydia is, trading just as freely as the App Store, I'll still be buying from the App Store because even though I don't think Apple is always as good as it could be vetting apps, I trust them more because they built their reputation on it and they want me to keep buying $800 phones from them every couple of years. They want me to keep buying Apple Watches and keep buying my apps and keep signing up for their services. Honestly, CD has been around long enough that I might not even worry about them. But if it is ruled that Cydia is allowed to do its thing, then it's ruled that anybody can do that. And then all of a sudden, you do have concerns of app stores opening up that don't necessarily have your best interests at heart. You want to start buying all your iPhone apps from Facebook? Interesting story, something to think about. I'm not against Cydia doing it. They may even have a case as far as the antitrust thing. It's all over, though. I'll still be buying my stuff from Apple. So there were a couple of things I was thinking about. What about you? A few ways to let me know. Like I say, you can email me, info@macosken.com. Seriously, show ideas heading into the holidays would be hugely appreciated. I'm not already worried about the week before. No, next week is the week before Christmas. So, of course, I'm already worried about that. I always try to worry at least 1 week ahead. But if you got some ideas for future shows, I would love to hear them. info@macosken.com. Or you can always leave a comment on this video. I was going to say I've got, this show tomorrow and that show tomorrow, but it's Saturday. Do me a favor. Enjoy your weekend, won't you? I plan to. And I'll talk to you soon. Ranty from Rant Vegas. Not really ranty. I don't think I was ranting. Hold on, let me move stuff around so I can get comfortable and we can have a chat. Haha. That's not really their slogan, is it, Eugene? Cydia, come for the fart apps, stay for the apps that steal your data. So says Eugene. I'm going to go back up to the top, though, because, we got stuff that we had to talk about before. Webb Bixby says he's doing well. Webb Bixby wore a suit and tie yesterday. Parole. Ken had a great mom story. We did that earlier. Okay, roll call. There we go. Nate wonders if I'm going for an interview at the grocery store. I found a new grocery store that I like, and no, I don't want to spend any more time there than I absolutely have to. Bill says he misses the analyst sound effects. Who had sound effects? The only one I remember that had a sound effect was Charlie Wolf, which had the wolf howling. He unfortunately passed away. No, Andrew, not Chuck E. Cheese. Not Chuck E. Cheese. Showbiz, where a kid can be a kid. I absolutely did hit record. Thank you, John. I don't know why it's glitchy though. Oh, but well, I was going to say bye, David, but David's gone. Unless he was, getting here saying hello, in which case, hi. That's interesting. Brian says it feels, it really seems that there are at least three price points for each of Apple's hardware areas: wireless earphones and earbuds, iPads, watch, etc. Apple is by no means inexpensive, but low end is reasonably priced. What's funny is if they had started with, the prices that we now think of as reasonable, we'd have left them out of town. So they start high, right? Although, what was it? The Nokia N95, I think, without a contract was 700 something dollars back in 2006 or 7. And I remember leaving there thinking, that's insane. And now I'm like, oh, is it almost time to spend $750 on a phone again? Eugene says analysts are paid for an opinion of the future. True, but they can be judged as objectively wrong after the fact, so they can be bad. And they can be, well, yeah, okay, or incorrect. I don't disagree with that. It doesn't necessarily mean their ideas aren't, worth considering, though. Who was the Apple doomsday analyst who was always so pessimistic? I do not remember, Bill. I think what's funny is I was trying to remember who that was earlier, and I can't. I'm also trying to remember there was a guy, I couldn't remember his name for the life of me. There was a guy who was always right. He was independent and he would always crush it. He would always know that Apple was going to, beat expectations, and he would even know by how much. And people started following him. I want to say that Philip Elmer DeWitt was writing about him when he was still at Fortune. And something happened. I don't remember what, but he missed. He missed wildly. And the thing is, he had actually started to advise people on investment, and a lot of people followed him, and a lot of people lost like a serious amount of money. And dude just like disappeared after that. And I don't mean nefarious. It's not like, it was not a DB. I can't remember. He didn't. He basically removed himself from the conversation. He apologized. He talked about what it was he had missed, and then he was just gone. Uh, anyway, can't remember his name. Sorry, I'm reading. I kind of wish these conversations were threaded because I think there are like 3 going on here, and I can't tell who's saying what to whom. That's kind of funny. Matthew says maybe there will be a one more thing called One More Thing, The Wrath of Khan, or Return of the Jedi, or The Thriller in Manila. I like that idea. One more thing harder. One more thing another day. That's good. Maybe they can do a Dr. Seuss tie-in and do One More Thing 1 and One More Thing 2. One More Thing Revisited. Yeah, the art for that show was just One More Thing, I think, with the first one more sort of taped over the other one. Nate said the thing about it wasn't me that said the thing about the $2,000. I mean, I did quote it, but it was Ben Beharan from Creative Strategies, and Tech Pinions, I think, might be his site. I'm not 100% certain. Yeah, I can't imagine $2,000 headphones. I mean, I can imagine them, but I can't imagine what I would be able to hear in them that I wouldn't be able to hear in, say, $1,000 headphones. Do you think you really hear the extra $1,000? I'll bet there are audiophiles who say you can. Oh, well, David says they're part of his world, and some people will pay the price of a house for a tube-amped turntable-based system. He's seen headphones at over $8,000? Really? Okay. Wow. Hey, we're back to the Cydia slogan. Stay for the ones that steal your data. So I'm nearly down to the bottom, guys. I'm nodding. I think what Matthew is saying is right. It's that 550, right? I mean, you can like Beats are so expensive and they're like 350. And I never understood that, but it's sort of status symbol-y. And you got the Beats logo, and all that stuff. $550 and there's no logo. I mean, it may sound amazing. They may sound amazing. I don't think I'll ever know how they sound because I don't want to know. If they sound that good, then I don't want to be like, oh well, it's only $550. I bought a car one time that cost $1,000 and it got me across the country. Bought another car one time that cost me $1,100. It also got me across the country. Now, granted, these were both a few years ago and they were very old cars, but $550 for headphones. Okay. Hey, I think we've reached the end of the conversations there. We need a better chat room. Well, I'd like to thank the good people at YouTube for making this a thing that I can do at no additional cost. So I don't disagree, but all right. We are at the bottom of the show. Thank you, everybody, so much. I do hope you have a wonderful weekend. Mask up, socially distance, wash your hands, all that stuff. But relax, enjoy it. Take some time off. macOS Ken Monday in a few minutes, this Monday afternoon. I hope you're all here, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Take care.